Okay, so thanks for showing up. I'm showing some stuff that what you guys, if you went to the last user group, you'll see a couple repeats, but since then, I don't know why, well, I do know why, because this is kind of a book I'm experimenting with, this Armor collection of sci-fi suits. But I started experimenting even more with the replicator stuff, but I then went away from that. So I'll show a little review of some of the stuff that we talked about last time. So this is using replicators in Modo, and so the suit on the far, same up there, yeah, far left, will be one prototype part, that little chrome piece, and then replicated across a standing figure. And so Neville Page gave me the figures to experiment with, and so all I did was, in this case, take different zones. So it's maybe like the forearms and the torso. They were just different. Copied out the mesh, put it in a separate mesh by itself, and then I could change the density, and that would actually give me freedom to change the replicator sizes independently, arms, legs, torso, that sort of thing. And so I'm going to show a whole bunch of suits that have happened since our last user group meeting, and then we were up in San Francisco last Friday, so this is actually part of the presentation I showed for the 601 recorded release event, so we flew up and showed some of this stuff, so you might see it on their website. These were actually the very, very first replicator suits that I ever did. At our last user group meeting, I think I only whipped out like 10 the night before, but I actually went back to sort of pick out some of these. So what's cool about this is the way that I use the replicators. This is effectively a sketching tool for me. So I'm making it symmetrical so I don't have to. I'm just looking for designs, and I'm looking for starts, and if I go back and paint something, I don't want to have to paint both sides. So I'm doing symmetrical lighting in this case, so dead center, and then it's just mirrored on the other side, so it's like one half a mesh for the body and then instanced, and so I get automatic mirroring, and then you'll see that those are iterations, right? So those are all the same prototype pieces, and just material changing and changing my numbers on the replicators. So what you can do that's really cool, and the way I use it as a sketching tool, is you set each frame in an animation, you set a different seed number, and change your rotations and prototyping, scaling sizes, etc., under the replicator menu. And so you can set a bunch of these and let them run overnight and come back and have, for instance, like all 6 of those suits the next morning. And then you're just looking for happy accidents. And so I'll take like the chest piece off of one, the legs off of another, et cetera, et cetera. And they all match because it's the same perspective, same lighting. And so it's a way that I can just sort of get me out of, break up my muscle memory and not, and create things that I couldn't really create another way. In this case, that's just one hexagon plate on the far left, the white suit there. And then it's just a material change for the middle one. And then on the far right, only at the top part there, really on the chest, is where I started to paint and clean it up in Photoshop. Now you could, especially now with 601, you could go in and make all the replicators. You could pick them independently and move them around, and maybe Andy will talk a little bit about that. But this is all done in 501. Same thing here. This had a little more Photoshop over the top. But I had some nice plate pieces, and then I weathered it up like he's been out, ice climbing or something, so it's got some snowy bits on him, and dented up his suit. There's another one. Again, you can see that it's on the right is the full thing, and then there's a lot of painting back over the top. So whenever we're doing a lot of stuff for entertainment, of course, it's weathering things and making them look like they've been worn for a while. And here's another. So these are different suits that I hadn't showed the last user group meeting. And the little hexagon mesh there was just a custom brush in Photoshop, threw that over the top. You can see it's quite loose and painterly, because these are just quick ideas and really looking for a direction. And it's sort of like, it's all about happy accidents and sort of controlled chaos in a way. But again, these are all replicator based, so it's all physical geometry. These are the ones I showed you guys at the last user group meeting. So it's one prototype piece across the mesh, different zones, so I scale it differently, I do different densities, and then you can change materials. And that's actually the exact same part as the one on the right, the hexagon piece. It's just subdivided to get the circles on the left. And I just took one of the little loops, one of the edge loops, and just put a stripe on it. So you can see you get a lot of variety without actually changing much at all. And you can get like 60 or however many iterations you want and let them run overnight. And so you'll see that, those are the same figure, a different prototype part. So introduced a new piece for the torso here, but still using the other ones. So you'll see the circles there along the legs on the far left, subdivided versus not subdivided, right? So I can do a faceted versus something soft, which is really fun to be able to go back and forth for a totally different aesthetic, but the same arrangement of parts. And then there's a few more with just material changes and bringing in probably another prototype part, maybe projecting off the surface a little bit. So the thing that I started playing with after our last meeting was doing projection maps and doing these sort of skin suit experiments. So it's less about, there's very few replicators actually coming, but these are the maps I used to get stuff like this. So this on the far left is the map for that suit. And then the stuff on center there and the detail shot, that's just a little bump map I was just doing a little test. But the two on the left, they're the same map. And what I'm doing is, that's done, that map was made also by happy accidents in a program called Alchemy. And so you get this vector-based, not really vector-based, but you get a really clean, sort of nice black and white image. And you can do gray, color, whatever you want. But in this case, it has this thing called ribbons, and you can sort of, sketch with it and come up with some really interesting patterns that have nice sharp geometry to them, or nice sharp edges. And I found that it worked nicely. The second one, that's just a custom brush. That's one of my custom brushes. It's only one brush, and it's just been repeated, just scattered through that image area. And that's actually the wheel well of one of my car renderings that I made the custom brush. So a lot of times I'll take my own renderings, sample them, make my custom brushes into Photoshop, and then use them this way abstractly, and then throw them into Modo, and then project them across anything, any skin, and see what I get. The other one in the middle is actually the same custom brush as the one on the left, except that I just set it to repeat, and I just ran vertically with spacing turned on, and then I warped it after the fact. And the one on the right is another custom brush, which is just an angular one, and I ran it across one side, and then I just mirrored it to the top. And so these are the maps that you'll see in these next series of figures. So this is going now in a different direction. There are no replicators on these suits. It's all projections. There are 3 skins, though, that make up these suits. I think there's, well, the one on the right there, I think there's only 2 skins there present. But I went in and I took the figure and just really expanded out 3 different skins. And it's all to scale, because the materials like to work for the proper scale. So the whole thickness of the thing is maybe only about 8 millimeters, I think. Maybe 8 to 10. This is a figure that Neville Page gave me to experiment with. And so there on the left, you can see that's 2 skins. So what I did there was I just chose the entire mesh, and I don't know what the tools, I think it's called shift. And I shifted every polygon out. So it made one little edge loop around every polygon. And then the one on the left is subdivided, so I have all these little bumps, which I thought looked like a cool pressure suit. Like if these are supposed to be, sci-fi suits, maybe it's for space, and it's got some sort of pressure suit. Here you can kind of see on the right, the pressure suit is actually faceted. So it's not subdivided there. You see it showing through the little translucent areas. You sort of see that it's faceted, as opposed to, subdivided. And then the one in the middle has the third suit, which is the third skin is the white. So the one on the left, the copper color is skin 1. The white is skin number 2, which is offset by like only 1 millimeter above that bumpy one. And it's set to stencil there. And then the one in the middle, I just changed the color on the stencil one to blue. And then I have another skin with some of the polygons hidden, like around the neckline there. And that has probably, probably just one more map on it. Set to bump and set to transparent amount. And diffuse color, probably. This is another one. The one on the left is two skins. The white areas underneath are actually a sort of stenciled shape, and then the black has really just same thing. It has transparent amount, has reflectivity turned up, etc. But it's all material based. And this is what's really, really fun about this, is that once you have a base model, like you could do this with Gary's cars as well, right? But it's all material based exploration. And what's fun for me is that I get to play with materials that I would never spend the time to paint. Like this image in the middle, it's too much effort, right? And so you're just not, you're gonna tend to stay away from that as a designer, because you usually don't have the amount of time to explore and do that sort of thing. So this is a really fun way to go in and start playing with material and color combinations that you really won't spend the time doing in Photoshop or any other way. So it's generating a new aesthetic for me that I wouldn't normally draw in paint, which is the most exciting part. This one in the middle has a little stencil plus displacement, so you can see that the little black areas actually have thickness to them. Again, they're all just skins. I didn't model any of that, any of those shapes. This was an experiment to see if I could put, so far like the suit here is symmetrical, the design application. But if I wanted to pose something, so there's a posed figure on the left, so if something had, now for illustrative purposes, maybe you don't want to do a dead symmetrical thing because it's a little boring from an illustration perspective, but it's fine from a design study. But the experiment here was to try and put the two together. So could I do a more asymmetric pose and do an asymmetric suit? And would the asymmetric suit still look good, right? Because a lot of times, functionally, we want things to be symmetrical because we're symmetrical. But these are all asymmetric suits, much like the previous female alien. And so, and I think it actually still works. And the other idea was, you know what, maybe if it's asymmetric and I have a dynamic pose, what if I just drop the far side into shadow, right? And just rim light it. Your brain will think it's symmetrical and we don't even have to worry about that other side of the suit. And actually that turned out pretty good too. So the one in the middle is kind of that idea of just rim lighting something and letting the other side of the suit just disappear. So really just having to worry about one side. So you can project it and get dynamic poses and all that sort of stuff. The map there is on the left. And I also had an exact map that matches that shape that's black and white. So the black and white's used for the stencil, which cuts it out. And the color, the one on the left here, is where the diffuse color is coming from. And then I just duplicated it and I used it on two of the skins. So there's a transparent skin with transparent amount turned on. Then there's the diffuse color along with it. And then a stencil on top of that. So again, not something I would probably spend a lot of time drawing and painting. These are, there's a series, these next 4 suits. The ones on the left are procedural suits using, I think, what is it? I think it's the cellular procedural, what is it called? It's procedural what in Modo? Layer? Yeah, and effectively it's just, you know, you assign numbers and you can make a map out of it, right? So it's just playing with the numbers and setting it to probably displacement. And then one on the right is using my flat Photoshop maps along with the dimpled pressure suit underneath. So you'll see a difference here as I go along. So again, the one on the left, I'm just changing numbers in the way that that cellular procedural is mapping across that surface. And then the one on the right is actually something that was done with a map that came out of Photoshop. And there's, again, there's open areas and skins are really close, so you can actually see them. There's a couple details coming up. The one on the left, again, same exact, it's all with the same cellular map, and I'm just changing numbers, and I'm getting these design variations on the left. And so these effectively are becoming my first sketches. And then you go, and you know, they're not always working right, so you just mix and match and pick things. But it gets a good start. And then the stuff on the right is, again, the maps plus a procedural little bump map for the dimples. Again, there's the same thing again, but you see the variety. And so what's cool about these is that, well, one, they're super fast to do, but you can just explore a whole range of things, and you can really get into some new aesthetics that you probably wouldn't invent any other way. So the one on the left there is the pressure suit. So that's just one skin with a diffuse color map and also a displacement map. So there you see some of the little nubs are actually inverting and collapsing down into themselves. That's because there's actually a map put on used for displacement as well. So they're like pushing some of those bumps down and some are staying in the same place. So, and then there are some transparent skins with some transparent amount stuff turned on over the top of that sort of bumpy pressure suit. And this one on the left is the pressure suit again. And all the black and white stuff on it is just a diffuse color. Projecting in some odd ways. So I tend to use a lot of like spherical projection, cylindrical, and planar when I'm doing these things. And you play a lot with the numbers. So you just bring in the map and you can play with sizing, rotation, right? Things like that to get some really abstract results. So suit on the left is the pressure suit plus just a procedural modo material called nets, I think. And I did nets and then just threw gold material on top of it. And then I changed the color from gold to this kind of reddish orange color, and then I put one of my turned on the third layer and used transparent amount to let us see through some of it. So it actually has thickness, which in the end, this is actually double-sided, that top suit, and I decided it was not worth the rendering time. But what's really, really cool is I'm not modeling, there are no edge loops. Right, there's like all those cut lines, if we go back to like that guy on the far right there are no edge loops in there, right? All those cut lines are strictly coming out of my projections with a bump map and displacement sometimes. Displacement's tough because it starts faceting the rest of your suit. You really have to bump up the subdivision levels to get a nice quality rendering. So I tend not to go there. Here's a couple more examples. So there you can sort of see all three layers working together. So black and white underneath is the pressure suit, lace is number 2, the nets, I should say, and then the black and white stripes that's transparent, that's on the top. And another example. Yeah, I like this one. It's got some, because it has a nice frosted look like in his shoulder there. It almost looks like a frosted swim fin. And this actually does have a couple replicators. I should go back here. The little, not that one, but this one, the little glowing blue rings of light in there are actually just a little prototype part that had a couple edge loops that I set to polygon glow, and they're floating in across that torso part. So these all have the same. They just have a couple little pieces floating in there to add another layer of, dimensional, physical, tech and visual noise underneath those things. So they all have that. And so I think these are actually poking through the ones down there on his abdomen, whereas the others are buried deeper. And you can just change that, right, with the replicator numbers. You can just offset some, not others, and change the scaling. There's a few more on that one. But again, it's pretty fun because there's no modeling involved. And there's no painting even. So it's literally about as chaotic and happy accident as you could get. So then 601 came out 2 days ago, which is super cool. And so, of course, I invited Yazan up, the material master, to come and help and see what we could invent together yesterday. So I did a few on my own to show Yazan when he showed up, and then we experimented yesterday for a couple hours. And so I'm going to show the next suits, which will finish me up. These are all done in 601. So I took the same model, and we were experimenting with the texture replicator. So 601 is a really cool new tool, which is texture replicating. And you can take a photograph, and this is a photograph I took of I think it's a light, actually. That's a lampshade. And it was, some shade. I was moving my camera a lot to get that effect. So I just took this photo, and what you can do is you can bomb the surface of a mesh with this photograph. And so we started to experiment with that. And so these suits are only one skin. It just took the most outside layer, basically. So there's not, I didn't play with transparency amount yet because we didn't have time to do all the renderings, and I wanted to have stuff to show. So these are just by changing, what I did was ran these night before last and went into the texture replicator and changed all the numbers per still frames of an animation. I just save out each frame as a separate still image, and then that's what you're seeing here. So I render like 8 suits overnight and come back, and they all look completely different. And literally wasn't doing previews to see if it was any good. We'd just throw them out later if they weren't. So I would just literally go in and change the numbers and move to the next frame, change the numbers, move to the next frame, change the numbers, right? And then hit render, walk away, come back the next morning, and then see what I have. So you'll see there's the transition between the two. And so I've got 6 suits, all done with the same photograph, which was this, right? And it blends together so you don't see the hard edge, right? You can control all that. You can control the size of how it's projecting across. You can, so this is really playing mostly with size and rotation, that sort of thing. So, more happy accidents, always. So, but some pretty cool effects. And again, now it's nice, they're all the same perspective, same lighting. I can mix and match these. So I could take these 6 layers inside Photoshop, stack them on top of each other, and just erase to blend them together, which is, actually the fastest, simplest way to do that, to create a still image. Because again, what I'm looking for is a sketch, but it's a photoreal sketch. And that's really the difference in this technique. Okay, there's the photo on the left. That's the resulting suit. All 3 of those are using the exact same photograph, and it's one opaque skin. There's only 2 settings, diffuse color and bump. And I'm just duplicating this. I didn't go make a special bump map at all. I just duplicated the diffuse layer and set it to bump, and that was it. So, and unfortunately these, I didn't render them, I didn't have time to render them super high res, but there's some really nice subtle things happening if you were to get close enough to like the guy on the right in through here on his shoulder. You'll see these little orange lines in the photograph. Over there, they look like little strands of carbon fiber, or I should say Kevlar, right? Like this yellow-orange, it's like Kevlar plus carbon look. It has a really rich look to it. If you rendered higher res, you would see that stuff. These are all rendered just like 1,200 pixels tall. All right, there's the photo on the left, and there's the results. The exact same photo, just changing the numbers with the texture replicator. So, not stuff that you can predict, right? But a lot of fun. So for instance, I like the shoes on the middle one, but I like the upper chest part of the one on the right, and maybe I want some, overall color and noise detail through the abdomen of number 1. Just take them, stack them, erase, blend, paint over the top. Again, this is the start of the suit, right? It's not like it's a finished piece, but it is photoreal, so you get to play with things that you would never spend time rendering in Photoshop. Here's another photo I took. So these are all photos I've taken from, all my travels wherever. So this is a Calder mobile. Flipped it 90 degrees and put that on, and that's the suit that I got, using that as my source. And you'll see that I'm projecting the entire photo with the hard edge as well, but it's fading it using a bias and gain inside Modo. You actually will blend those together, and so they're effectively stamping all over the surface and blending. And the blending is giving me these really interesting, you see the they transition and fade in and out of each other, but you get some really interesting transitions. And again, it's a great starter, and once you see something you like, then you can go in and paint over the top and take it to the next finished level. And I think this is probably my last one. That's the photo that I took, and I just threw it on top of the suit, played with the texture replicator, and that's the result. And I think that is the last one. So I'm putting up this stuff on my blog if you guys want to follow. So, questions? No? Does that look like fun? I can't, I can't have my glasses on, I can't see. It's all right, because it's too bright. Oh, there, I can see. Sorry, yeah. Back there.
This is all materials, but let's say when you have one layer that's like transparent over another layer, are those actually
Yes. That's it. It's just, I just took it, and the happy accident of finding that pressure suit was I was trying to shift it out, but I picked the wrong tool, and it moved every single polygon out and gave me that, but I kept it because it worked. But then I did it over again, and so I got a smooth transition out, right? So I just offset basically larger by 2 millimeters, 3 millimeters, 5, whatever you want. So, and then you by changing transparent amount, you can then mix those together. But this one, if you look, this is just one layer. There are no 3 skins on this. It's just one opaque. I mean, yes, the gloves are on the layer underneath, but the one on top, like that wetsuit, except for the gloves and his head, everything else is just on one skin, not using transparent amount. So that the texture replicator gives you a lot of that translucency. It actually looks like there's a lot more depth than there is on the previous suits that were just white, like those ones, if we go back, like that one on the right. See, like that's opaque, except there's a stencil that's cutting out, but there's no like little areas that are soft that are letting us see through. There's no fades, basically. Like this has fades in it, so it's fading in and out where we can see through. Like that one has fades, right? We can see through, and then it gets a little bit milky and covers, but that doesn't, right? So this one is kind of what I was doing with the maps, and now on the same single layer, I'm getting the different result by using the texture replicator. These, I think the ones towards the end are probably the more interesting, and I made them a little bit larger res, so I'm getting that, you know, happening all in one skin. And I think my bump map might have been actually offset to a different one because it doesn't seem to be matching, but it gives a nice effect as well. Any other? That makes sense? Sure. Yeah. So texture replicators live under texture locator or texture locator in the shader tree. There's a menu towards the bottom, and you literally just tell it what mesh to go to, and you load up your image in your material and start having fun, basically.
How do you come up with the numbers?
Well, I like 5, so that's where I start usually. And then I go to 22, and then so it's like, you know, how do you pick them when you play the lottery? Right. It's completely random. Yeah, and then, you know, I can't, because it's so hard to predict, because I don't like do one and wait for a preview render, so I'm too impatient. So it's not like I'm gonna like do one and then see, does that look cool before I change it? I literally just go and change them all, right? And then just save it out and then let it render later and just come back, right? So I think it's a more efficient way to use the computer basically, and use the tool, is to just stage all that stuff, because it's gonna be random anyway. You just let it go. And don't let it use any of your, you know, your time, basically. Make it do the work, and then just come back and throw out all the ones you don't like. It doesn't matter if you throw out, right? If you render 40 of them overnight, so what if you throw out 35? You still got 5 that are just kick-ass, right? So, any other questions? Anyway, the thing is, that the reason I wanted to build on what Gary was doing, which is some super cool stuff with the materials, is that how amazing Modo is with masks and materials and mapping and projecting. There's so much you can do as a design tool that's really, really fun. So I encourage you all to give it a shot. So thanks.
Break, and then we'll get Andy up here for 601.